Of Dylan Roof for clues to a possible motive behind the devastating attack. The text details a philosophy of white superiority, referring to the Trayvon Martin case as, quote, an awakening. Joining us now is former ATF agent and senior vice president and chief security officer of FJC Security Service, Matthew Horace.
Good morning.
Hi, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
So as an investigator, when you find some sort of manifesto online or in a suspect's bedroom, I mean, that must be a treasure trove of clues for investigators. Do you feel like that's sort of hitting the jackpot in terms of a case?
Well, it is, but remember several things. Number one, we don't investigate people because of their views. We investigate people because of their crimes. And in many cases with these sort of groups, people who espouse and convey these messages, it's their predicate crimes, the firearms crimes, the explosive crimes, and other things that get us into the group. I mean, these groups have existed for quite some time, and they still do, but the manifesto is just a small part of what we look at.
But I guess what I mean is that we always search for motive, and even though you don't necessarily need motive in court, it still helps to have motive. And does this provide that?
Well, let's face it, all last week, the world is wondering what could have inspired someone to do this. Certainly, when we go back and see what he was reading and absorbing and processing, this gives us a little insight into what he was doing, what he was reading, what he was thinking.
So let's look at that. I mean, I want to look at this website, or at least the website that is now linked to him had this 2,500-word manifesto. And I do want to read a portion of it, not to aggrandize him or his mindset in any way, but because we always do look for a window. Everybody always does want to know why. And it sounds as though the Trayvon Martin case was a real sort of ignition switch for him. He believed, because of that case, he believed that George Zimmerman was in the right and that the Trayvon Martin case represented black on white crime. So here's what he wrote, and this is where he just spells out his motive very clearly. Let me read it. I'm not in the position to alone go into the ghetto and fight. I choose Charleston because it is the most historic site in my state, and at one time had the highest ratio of blacks to whites in the country. We have no skinheads, no real KKK, no one doing anything but talking on the internet. Well, someone has to have the bravery to take it to the real world, and I guess that has to be me. Do you see that as his motive spelled out in that paragraph?
Well, it doesn't mean it has to be. You know, in law enforcement, we become desensitized because we see this sort of thing all the time, whether it's this group, this person, or other groups. So the fact that he's using this as what turned his head and made him do things doesn't mean that it actually was. It could have been anything or a million things that did it. That's what was written in the manifesto, and that's what he's saying. But we really can't believe the logic of someone that could do something like this anyway.
Tragically, we've seen these mass shootings all too often, and you think that the people who perpetrate these all have sort of common characteristics. How do you define those? Well,
we go back and we look at what happened in each individual case. There was always something, there were always clues to others that things like this could happen, but they unfortunately didn't pick up before things did happen. Look at Columbine, look at the Aurora movie theater, white male, certain age, certain beliefs, and we always want to go back and say, like, mental health might have been an issue. There was no mental health issue in this. This was a 21-year-old adult who told people and forecasted that he was going to do this and espouse racist views.
And so what can investigators do beforehand? I mean, this is where it gets so tricky. He had these pictures of himself burning the American flag, hoisting the Confederate flag, holding a weapon. You know, these are now red flags. Now it all seems to sort of make sense. But of course, with our freedom and First Amendment, is there anything that investigators can do before the fact when they stumble upon something like this online?
Well, when investigators receive the information, there are things we can do. But remember, we're not investigating views and viewpoints. We're investigating crimes. I think the bigger issue is what can people do? In every single case of an active shooter, there's been clues, there's been little red flags, and people around these individuals have said, we knew something wasn't right. I looked at the interview the other day. The gentleman said, we knew he had a problem, but I gave him his gun back. All right? Those are the sort of things I think we need to look at. What are people these individuals seeing?
And what can people do?
Well, they can notify police. They can not give a gun back to a person. They can try to help them get help. They can notify the authorities that someone that has explosives and guns in their home and now is seeming to take a turn mentally, they can notify authorities that they're seeing some problems.
That would help. Matthew Horace, thanks so much for all the information. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Let's get over to Chris.
You know, Allison, you're right. There's such a curiosity about who does these is usually a pretty